Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday evening. I hope for those of you are watching, you are going to get a ton of information today for couples in quarantine. And the reason I wanted to put this together and ask some of my relationship expert friends and colleagues is that I am a couple, one half of a couple in quarantine, and I need help. So, that being said, and without further ado, I'm going to bring in Allison. All right, here we go. Hi.
Hi, Camelia. How are you?
I'm in SOS. I need your help.
I'm here for you, girl.
Okay, amazing. Can you share with our viewers who you are and the services that you provide?
Yes, of course. I would love to. I am Allison Villa. I'm a registered psychotherapist and relationship expert. And I'm the founder of House and Hook, which is an online platform designed specifically to give parents support to reclaim the passion and play in their relationship. And it's all virtual.
You mean there's passion and play in pandemic? Are you sure about that?
I know it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe. It is possible. It is possible.
Okay. All right. So I want to start with the question, what are couples really struggling with right now? And I know there could be so much, but what comes to mind when I ask you that question?
You know, the biggest thing I am hearing from my couples and my clients right now is everyone is dying for time alone. And usually time alone is just embedded into your everyday life. For some people who commute to work, they have that time on their way there. And they're alone, and then on their way back or on their way to pick up the kids, like even the 5 minutes walking to school or having your little drive or whatever it is, those little moments, we don't realize how important they are for us as individuals. They really fill us up. And a lot of people are really missing that right now.
Great. And I mean, not great, but I thank you for sharing that. I feel that as well. We're going to go through some of the tips and talking points that you had shared with me as you were thinking about what we should be discussing for couples in quarantine. One of your quotes was self care is the foundation of every couple and help each other to make the time. And I think you alluded to that. So, what does this mean in your, terms? What does that mean?
Self-care is the intentional act of restoring yourself. It doesn't happen accidentally. And what we're experiencing right now, especially in social isolation, is that it definitely is not happening accidentally, especially for parents who are caregivers 24/7 right now. And some might be solely focusing on parenting, while others are also juggling working. There's a lot of caregiving happening right now. And if we don't carve out the time for self-care, we will not be able to fill ourselves up so that we can be there for, of course, ourselves first and for our families and for our partners. And so the tricky thing with parents is you can't take time for self-care unless you have the support of your partner. And it is so loving when your partner says to you, let me help you. Like, what time do you want to go for that walk around the block today and listen to your podcast? Like, is it at 4? Is it at 2? When can we carve out that time? And then you do the same thing for them. It makes you feel so loved, especially right now in this particular time.
It does. Only I think the challenge is those are not the conversations that are happening. And I don't know anybody who's listening whose partner has said, babe, is it your turn to take a walk and have your own time? But, that being said, I think that's what's missing, right? So
Mhm.
you're pointing out a normal behavior in a healthy home to consider, what a partner needs. So amazing tip. Next tip you said challenges in your relationships are your greatest opportunity for growth and deeper connection. Find empathy. You're on the same team. Now, before you move into your response to that and what you mean, it definitely feels for a lot of people that they're not on the same team. So please share your insights and any advice that you can give us around this particular statement.
So whenever things are difficult in a relationship, for at this time right now, we're speaking directly to the pandemic, but anytime there are challenges in a relationship, even if you think back to when you were new parents and you were getting adjusted to life with a newborn, it always comes down to whose life is harder. And this tends to be a conversation, right? I see you.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
It's like, but my life is harder because I've been home with this baby all day and I haven't even been able to take a shower or brush my hair or whatever, or eat some food, right? And then the other person also has challenges. Like, I've been at work all day. I haven't had a second to myself. I've been working all day. I just want to come home and have a minute before you hand me the baby. You know, I'm giving you this early example because when you, as parents, new parents, learned to adjust to that new normal with your new baby, that built resilience in your couple. And hopefully during that time, you were able to communicate and find a way to move through that time. And so this time right now, those challenges that you're experiencing now, how you move through these, hopefully in a healthy way, I'm going to give you some tips.
Amazing.
Will help you feel more connected and build that resiliency muscle in your relationship.
So let me ask you, why does empathy go out the window for a lot of couples? I mean, we know what it is. Maybe for our audience, we need to define that. But I feel like empathy is the first thing that leaves a marriage or a partnership. So how can can we develop a skill for empathy? Is there a way for us to be aware of when we're, being narcissistic or not showing that quality?
So that is a long conversation. I'm going to give you the short form, okay?
Yeah, okay, give me the short form.
So empathy is the ability to imagine how the other person may be feeling. So it's allowing yourself to step back out of your own shoes and have perspective. And you're right, Carm, it is hard. It is hard to do that. It takes a lot of practice to do that, especially in your closest relationships. We're often able to practice empathy more easily with people who are not in our day-to-day lives.
Like the milkman, the mail delivery guy, the pizza person.
Yes. So a simple tool that can be really helpful to start building your empathy is actually how to be a good listener. So a simple act if you're trying to practice this with each other and get better at it, it's reflect back what you heard your partner say before you respond to them. You know, we often listen to somebody and are getting ready to reply. And as soon as we're getting ready to reply, we're not listening anymore. And so really empathy is about really listening.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot out of this conversation, Allison.
I'm so glad.
Yeah. So, a quick communication tip you provided is one, connect first. So, be curious about your partner. Listen. You actually just chatted about that. Express how you feel and ask for what you need. I have to say that you would think this is common sense advice, and yet still, we're not doing this. So, why is that? And how do we become better at that?
So specifically right now, when we're in this pandemic, and I know right now as we're recording, we're in week 7, and when your brain is in stress for extended periods of time, it goes into distress, which means your cortisol levels are higher. And why that matters in your relationship is because when your cortisol levels are higher, you're not able to regulate yourself the way you normally can. And by regulate, I mean
Cortisol levels meaning high stress, right? Like when you're stressed, you have higher cortisol. Okay, got it.
right. So if you think back to like prehistoric times, you think about when the bear is chasing you and your brain is like, I need to survive. You're really in survival mode. You're not able to think clearly. You're not accessing your rational brain. Like right now we're having a conversation and we're listening to each other. But when you're in this distress or stress for an extended period, it's distress. And you're not able, like I said, especially with people who you're close to, you're not able to regulate yourself the way you normally do.
This is all gospel, really. And, this is how adults are supposed to communicate, are they not?
They are, but I mean, we're all doing the best that we can with what's going on right now. And I think having some grace for ourselves and for each other is the first step. So this is why I recommend connecting. Like, really be curious. At the end of the day, when your kids are finally asleep, it's not only about checking in with your partner, like, how are you really? How are you? But also, how am I? I've been taking care of everybody else all day, and you probably haven't even really given yourself much thought. So it's really for each other to hold that space and to make that 5 minutes like, okay, how are we doing really? And really
Right.
listen to each other and take interest. That's all we want as humans, is to be seen, heard, and understood. So that genuine curiosity, it goes a long way.
Can I ask when would be the best time? Is this something you sit at the dinner table to do? Do you do this first thing in the morning? Is it when you're both like in bed? When's an appropriate time to have the conversation of, hey, I want this, I need this, or whatever that looks like?
This is a great question. And truly, it really depends on your family schedule and what works for you. I know some people like to have the conversation at the breakfast table, even with the kids as a family.
I personally dislike morning conversations that have any, I don't want to start my morning that way. And yet my partner wants to talk about things in the morning. I'm like, no. So that's the other aspect, is the agreement. Like we have to
Mhm.
agree when we have these conversations. Do we or don't we? Or do I just have to do I have to listen when he talks? Is that just how it works? Like,
Well, some compromise is important in a relationship. So I'm sure you can have a conversation of like, okay, you like the morning. I'm not quite ready to dive deep first thing in the morning. Can we compromise? Can it be 11 a.m.?
okay.
Can it be just before we sit down for lunch, or right? Like, it is a conversation. And you, of course, you want to compromise and find a time that works for both of you.
Ah, such wisdom, I have to say. All right, your final tip for discussion is plan the long game. If this was our new normal, how could we make it sustainable, healthy, and fun? And how do we not burn out? And for the listeners, you really do. You also talk about new families, young families. That also is a new normal. Not only are we dealing with pandemic, but you also have a new little one or lots of little ones to deal with. So, what's your advice on that?
We do not want parents to burn out. Parents have the biggest load right now. They are playing all the roles in their child's lives. The caregivers, the teachers, the cooks, the cleaners, the playmates, the like really filling all of the roles. And we want to find a way. What we usually do is we compartmentalize like our work life, and then our home life, and then our couple time, and then our time with our kids, right? And what I encourage you to do is, how can you include the family in those activities together? Like, how can self-care include your kids? Can you do a little 7-minute workout with your baby on the floor? I know my 6 and 8-year-old like to do workouts with me, and they'll do most of the workout. They'll do it their
I
own
saw
way.
that. I saw
Yeah,
that. So
they love
cute.
it. So like
Yeah.
finding ways to incorporate also like doing couple time on the couch after dinner and put on some music, and your kids are there and they see, oh, you're having couple time. This is your adult time. And they're seeing you do those things. So how can you embed the things that are important to you, that fill you up, in your lifestyle right now, so that you're not waiting one day for this all to end and then you'll get your life back? We need to be incorporating that and adapting so that we feel good during the process as well. It's so important.
And what would you say to someone or to a person who feels, and oftentimes it's both people feel that they're carrying more weight than another person. And it becomes a, well, I did this and you did this. Like, how do you get out of that space?
Couples therapy, my friend.
Okay. Oh, we can't do a whole show on that. Can we do a
Oh
show?
man, I mean, it's so unique to the couple.
Yeah.
That's why I say that. Truly,
Yeah.
it's so much about each
I
of your personal
agree.
stories and what you're bringing to the relationship, and really shining the light on your individual relationship, because everyone is unique. Every relationship is its own little entity.
Right. And I think the by comparing yourself as a couple to another couple also probably doesn't help with your current situation. Yes or no?
100%. We are all our own people, and it's so important. You need to tune in and go inwards right now. This is not a time to be going outwards and comparing. What is the expression? Comparison is the death of.
I don't. Everything,
I
everything.
know.
Comparison is the
Oh,
death of happiness, I
yes,
think,
comparison is the thief of joy. That's what it is.
Okay, the thief of joy. I got that. So thank you so much. We are going to bring you back for our final panel discussion, Allison. We are getting, in the meantime, you may want to answer some of the questions that people are asking us, and I'm going to bring on our next guest. See you soon. All right, our next guest is Leanne Townsend, family lawyer. I'm actually going to let her share who she is, what she does, for everyone that's listening right now. Hey, Leanne.
Well, hi. Hi, how are you?
I'm amazing.
I'm happy to be here. I am a family law lawyer, and I'm also a divorce strategist. So I help people through all family law issues. It could be separation, divorce, cohabitation agreements, prenuptial agreements, the whole gamut.
Wow. And you know, they're saying and all the memes out there that you're going to be quite busy post pandemic. So I have to just dive right in. What is some Oh, yeah. What is some advice for couples in quarantine who are thinking about divorce? Because this discussion is happening. And I guess even before divorce, they're either married and they're wanting to separate. Along those terms, just breaking up.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm telling people is to first of all remember that we are in a pandemic. And because we're in a pandemic, all of us are stressed to the maximum right now. These are not normal times. So if you're in quarantine and you're fighting war with your spouse and you're getting on each other's nerves and you're thinking, hey, I think I may be done with this relationship, it's probably not the best time to be making that decision because we are in exceptional times. If you are thinking about it, say you felt that way before quarantine, and then, this really cemented those thoughts for you. I always say if you have kids to, whatever you're doing, put them first. So don't create more stress and disruption in the home if there's children there, especially given, no one is probably going to be able to leave the home right now. So if you really are serious that you want this to be your separation time, because there are some legal consequences to that. I would say that it's important to make it very clear to your spouse that it is your intention to separate because of the legal ramifications that flow from deciding on a date of separation. So it's important to make that clear. But as I say, now is probably not the time to be making such important decisions.
Fair. And that being said, because you've dealt with divorce for so much, what are the main issues in most divorces? Is there a recurring theme, that hot button? What do you see is the trend for divorce now?
There's a few things. Infidelity is one thing. Arguments over money is another common theme. But at the root of all of this is really just bad communication or a lack of communication between the parties. And I think that, a lot of couples, especially if they've been together a while, they get into this pattern of assuming that the other person, should be able to read their mind. I shouldn't have to tell my husband that I need this or I need him to say that or to support me this way. He should know. And if I have to tell him, well, that's unacceptable. And, at the end of the day, none of us are mind readers. And I think just communication always in a relationship is so important. And lack of communication usually is at the heart of, fights about money and different money styles, and also at the heart of, infidelity, because you've drifted apart. One party, maybe isn't communicating their needs to the other party. And, because they're not communicating that way, it gives rise to people straying.
Got you. And what advice do you have for co-parenting in quarantine? What does that look like, and how can people adjust to that scenario given, the pandemic?
Well, co-parenting, I guess, comes up in two ways right now. So you have parents who are, still together, or even potentially separated but living in the same home, who are co-parenting. And then you have parents who are, already living apart and co-parenting. So, in the first situation where people are living together, they're in the same home, I always say again, put your children first, work out an arrangement that is child focused. And, I know a lot of couples right now where they're both working from home. Some of them are, one's getting up at 5 a.m. and working, till noon, and the other one's watching the children. And then in the afternoon, it's switching. And so, I think being cooperative and working out, things like that is really important if you're under the same roof. If you're already separated and living apart, what the courts have been saying with respect to co-parenting is that whatever the parenting schedule was that was in place before COVID should still be in place. So, if you were a week on, a week off, or every other weekend, or whatever that schedule may have been, you are to keep following it. And there's been quite a few problems with that because there's been people who have been very fearful about COVID-19 and they didn't want their child changing homes, or they had concerns about the other parent maybe not following the safety protocols as closely, or being an essential worker.
There's legal precedence to that, in that, one can't just say, well, he's not doing this. Don't you have to abide technically by what your custody arrangement says, or by, so long as the safety of the children isn't compromised?
And that's what the courts have been saying. So when this first happened, back on, I guess it was March 17th, when, the courts closed, except for emergency matters. And, we were all told to stay in our homes. This is a really unique situation. There hasn't historically, at least, in modern times, been anything like this. So there wasn't case law that dealt with this exact type of situation. So at first, a lot of people were like, I don't know, what do we do? Is this,
a parent or a mother or father, whoever it is, where the kids happen to be during this lockdown, might say, well, they were here, so they can't go anywhere, even though that might not be welcome by the other parent. Is that what you're saying has happened and you've been dealing with? Okay.
Yeah, that's been happening. And the people have been, or other lawyers and myself have been bringing emergency motions to deal with that.
Okay. Oh, that's a whole other show in itself.
Yes.
What advice do you have for separated couples who are still living together in quarantine? Because regular loving couples are having a hard time. Now talk about separated couples in the same space. So what do you have to say about that? And what advice can you share with singles? By the way, statistically, for those who are watching, and it's a sad stat, domestic violence is up, abuse is up, calls to 911 and, calls regarding domestic violence is up, and police are being inundated by things like that. So what can you share to help people that are feeling so stressed in a separation situation?
Well, my number one piece of advice is don't kill your spouse, because that's going to lead to a lot of problems, and you don't want to do that.
Or hurt your spouse.
Or hurt your spouse. Yes, exactly. Do not do that. So, I have clients who are in that situation, and yes, it is extremely stressful for them. And, that's where I think some of Allison's advice even comes in, that, people need to be practicing the things like self-care and maybe keeping their distance from each other and limiting their communication if it's going to result in arguing and fighting and increasing an already stressful situation. So I think just, giving each other space, exercising self-care, and doing your best to just be respectful. You're stuck in this situation. You've got to make the most of it. You can turn it into, extremely hostile, highly stressful, time, or you can make the most of it. And my advice would be to do your best to do the latter.
And are you still working with clients that are coming to you in quarantine, inquiring about divorce? Are you getting calls from couples in quarantine that weren't thinking about it, saying, okay, I need a divorce? Is that happening?
Yes, I am. I've been quite busy actually. I've been getting calls from people, and some of them are calls from people who are already separated, and there's been issues around that. But there's people who are, already they were thinking of divorce, and now they want to finalize it. And again, there's some strategic reasons for doing it now because if everyone's property values and stock portfolios and everything are down, it could be to someone's advantage if they have to split all those things in half. So there's some strategy behind it. But I also just think, people are just acting out of emotion as well. And decisions that are based on purely on emotion are never usually good ones. But I think, some people just had enough. And so they're reaching out to find out what their rights are, what their obligations are.
And is there, anything that comes to mind for you that's an important discussion as a divorce strategist and as you're helping people kind of navigate these unfamiliar waters?
I think one thing people need to remember is that it is uncharted time. So we're learning as we go with some respects. Number two is, as you mentioned a little earlier, Carmelia, that with domestic abuse on the rise, my biggest concern is for people who are in that type of situation. They're, in quarantine or self-isolation with their abuser. And if there's anyone out there who's listening to the show tonight, I want those people to know that if they need to call the police, they need to do so. They need to make sure they have a safety plan. And that's really important. And if they are being abused and call the police, they can get their abusing spouse out of the matrimonial home. So, that's still an option. That would certainly be considered an urgent matter or an emergency that the courts are prepared to deal with at this time.
That being said, I'm not sure if this is your specialty or you can answer this. When is an appropriate time for parents to have the discussion with their children that mommy and daddy are considering, breaking up? I don't even know if they know the word divorce. A, there's younger children, and B, in my situation where I would have a young adult and a teenager, what's your advice on that kind of a discussion?
Well, it has to be child focused. And, part of that means it has to be age appropriate for the child. Because as you mentioned, a 3-year-old is going to be different than an 8-year-old who's going to be different than a 15-year-old. So whatever the discussion is and when it happens needs to be mindful of the age of the child. And I always think it's better to be open with children. Children are a lot smarter and more intuitive than we give them credit for. And when parents, try and keep things from their children, and children find out some other way or they're suspicious but mom and dad aren't saying anything, that harms your trust relationship with your child. And so it's really important to communicate with them. But there's also things that they don't need to know. They don't need to know every nitty gritty detail. They don't need to know that someone had an affair or that someone, gets on the other one's nerves, for this reason or that reason. They need to be protected from that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Is there ever a time like you feel that there should be a real distinction and a real separation, like protect the children? They don't need to know your dirty laundry or whatever you're dealing with, but you also don't want to set them up. And a lot of kids are surprised, parents do such a good job of sheltering kids from any conflict that it's such a culture shock. What do you mean you're getting divorced? Like in front of us, it's Wonderland. Like that's also fairly traumatizing, I think. Is that a good strategy? Or is that just, what's your comment to that?
I think we want to protect our children, of course, and we want to be, as I use the word child focused, and that's true, but that doesn't mean protecting them from life's realities either. I think that most children, in my experience anyway, are not totally shocked. You come across some of the adult children who their parents, split up when they're in their when the kids are in their 20s and have left the home, and the children are like, I don't know why they didn't do that a long time ago. So children usually know, even young children have sensitivities about it, but they're going to have to be, handled differently. But I think it's a rare situation where the children just have no clue and they're completely shocked, but it's possible, I suppose.
Well, thank you. I'm going to have you back in the green room as we bring out our next guest. Thanks, Leanne, and we will
Thank
see you
you.
in our panel. And I'm hoping we will not have technical difficulties. And if we do, I'm going to bring up Allison to just be on the backside in case we do have some relationship, no, technical issues. Hi, Natalia.
Hi, Carm. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh my God, I had to have you here. Can you please share with everybody what you do, your specialty, and we'll get right into the conversation.
Okay, so I am a breakup coach and dating strategist. And mainly as a breakup coach, I'm kind of unique in that I work through the entire spectrum. So I help people recover from bad breakups, but I also help people to initiate. And a lot of the time, I'm helping people get back together.
I know. We'll talk about all of those things. Hold on. Yes. Apparently, because we're friends off here, I chose all of some of my favorite people. You're very, very busy. What are you dealing with right now? And if you're able to share a story without giving it away or the client away, please share.
Okay. Well, first of all, can you see me okay?
Your tile is frozen, but I can hear you. So
Okay.
hold on. I'm going to bring Allison. You're just going to be on standby in case she pops off, and then we can continue the conversation. Okay. All right. Yeah, there, Natalia. You can try to put your camera back on. I'm asking her.
Okay. Well,
want,
as long as you can hear me.
yeah, you can turn your camera off, and I can hear you until we figure out the camera situation.
Okay, so yeah, so a lot of what I'm dealing right now is helping people get back together. And I would say over the last 3 years, this has been an increasing trend. And I have some theories on why that's kind of happening, but it offers me a very unique perspective on relationships because, there are a lot of people when they're within relationships where they're having a lot of like stress, they kind of want out. And so a part of what I can contribute to this conversation is if you're feeling that way,
that's my next question is if a couple is in quarantine and wants to separate now, is that even an option? And this could be a married couple or it could be a live-in couple, a couple that's living together.
So separating it's a process, and it's not something, especially if you've been together for a long time, it's something you're going to really want to think through, communicate with your partner throughout so that you don't end up having these regrets. And the process of deciding whether or not you want to end a relationship is called discernment. And it's a sort of like insurance to kind of take on in your breakup so that you don't end up with these major regrets.
Do you have a chart for that? Is there like a
Yes.
checklist? You do? Okay, great. We need our hands on that chart.
I do. Well, a part of where I drew this research from was a few years ago, there was a study that came out on 50 reasons why people stay together or break up. And I thought it was actually really fascinating. And I had printed it out and kind of geeked out over it. Like I categorized it into about 6 categories. So the first one being connection. And that's like a love, attachment. Is for some couples, it's kind of like addiction. And then the next one has to do with character. And that's a really big one, including trust, respect, compassion. The next main category is communication. And not just when things are good, but also how do we communicate under stress.
Okay.
And the next one is commitment and then compatibility. And the 6th circumstance that leads to breakups or like separations is circumstances. This global pandemic being one of them, right? Like these are unprecedented times. So I'm encouraging a lot of people, if possible, to kind of wait and just to be patient, to do what you can during this time. And I would say I offer about 3 main tips. The first one is to have a bit of a vision for how you want to come out the other end of this. Even if things are stressful, even if you separate, how do you want to look back on this time? Right?
Okay.
And you can still create some beautiful memories.
Sure. Okay, and thank you for all of that. Thank goodness this is recorded because I'm gonna play that back. Now, if a couple is like really, oh, here's a question. How do you break up with someone in quarantine? Now, all of the great tips, reassessing that, going through the chart, you have made up your mind. This is the time, quarantine or not. I'm breaking up with someone, and it doesn't matter if they live together. I'm talking about just a general breakup. They could be living together, they could be separated, like in different residences. What's your strategy or process to break up?
Well, you're going to want to communicate it to your partner in an effective way and not blindside them, because like that, those make for some of the worst ones is when they come out of nowhere. Sometimes it will be a series of conversations that's like where, you're kind of letting the other person in on the fact that I am having these concerns, I am having these doubts, so that they have a bit of a chance to also acclimatize to the fact that this is happening. And then beyond that, also having a plan and executing on that and sticking to those, and not wavering, because that's what makes breakups and separations really messy.
Oh, so the let's talk, I want to break up is not the strategy.
No, absolutely not. It doesn't feel good for either person. And it all comes back to, having communication skills. Like, can you have difficult conversations?
Yes. Now, do you find in your work that breakups sometimes do come as a surprise? I mean, clearly you've stated, don't blindside them, because some people probably have gotten blindsided. What do you think that's all about? What's your advice to someone who just got blindsided? How do they cope with that?
Oh, well, first, just recognize that a big part of your grief right now is coming from the shock of how it all happened. So first, you're going to want to give yourself a little bit of that of time to just kind of process the fact that this is happening, and then beyond that, to have some sort of a recovery plan. Like, what are the things within your control, and then work that plan, for the first month, especially when things are really difficult, and then continue to add and build on that. But you can be extremely compassionate and patient with yourself. It's a huge loss.
It is. I mean, as a matchmaker and relationship coach, often I am speaking with people that are still recovering, and they know they want to be in a partnership. And many times their partnership ended not because they chose that. It was because their partner had chosen that, and they desire and wish to be in a long-term relationship. And this is, a question that is asked a ton. I don't know that you have one answer for it, but everyone wants to know, when is the right time? When do you know you should stay in the relationship, and when is the right time to leave? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, when you have actually really gone through the process of deciding for yourself whether or not this is right, this is not an emotional decision, especially if you have, really invested in this relationship. So have you given it some time? Have you had the communication? Have you tried different things to get things on track so that you are at peace that this does not work? So that's the time to stay, is when there are still things to work on. And then you leave when like, we have hit our limit, and like, no matter how much more, you cannot continue, you can't work on these issues.
Now, in many times, and not always, the breakup is motivated by one party. So when one party is a no, and the other party is this is workable. What do you say to that? How do you deal with that when one partner is, no, we can fix this, and the other one's like, no, we can't fix it. We keep going through the same thing. Are you there?
I'm back.
Okay, I heard you. It's okay. Oh. Did you hear the question?
No, I missed the question.
Okay, the question is, one person is one person is a no, the other person is like hanging on for dear life.
Aww. Well, Carm, isn't that so often the case? And that's where really, I look to attachment theory. That's when things are just kind of, whether or not someone actually has an anxious or avoidant attachment style, that's just when that dynamic has kicked in. One person's just checked out. And, the more they're checked out, the more it brings up anxiety in the other person. It's a really common breakup dynamic, if you will. Most of us have been on both sides of it.
Yes.
And it's not pleasant. And sometimes that's just what needs to happen in order for a couple to separate.
In your opinion, do you believe that there should be, greater consideration when children are in the mix? I often hear from couples or singles now that say, I stayed in the relationship because of the kids, and yet they stayed in the relationship and they weren't happy in it.
Yeah. I don't have children. I mainly work with people who don't have children, but that said, I used to be a teacher. So, I know families. And
Yes.
absolutely, there is extra care that needs to be given when kids are involved because they're impressionable. But at the same time, we are living longer. We have more options. People are separating. It is a part of life. So why not teach children how to do this in a healthy way? And it doesn't have to be happy, but you can still grieve and let go in a healthy way.
I love that. All right. Well, we are going to now bring on the entire cast or panel. Hi, welcome. Oh, you're back. Okay, Leanne, anytime, Natalia, you want to, she's off. Now she's going to come back. I hope she'll come back. Poor thing. She's having some technical issues. So I'm just going to fire off some questions, and hopefully if you are listening and you are watching and you have questions, if not, I got all the questions. It's fine. I did this to help couples and my relationship. For the panel, let's see here. How can couples stay happy in chaos? Now, there are many different things, so maybe you can really just think of a tip that works for this scenario, and I'll start with you, Allison.
I love this question. I recommend right now, how can we stay happy in the chaos is we know that this is a challenging time. So I recommend having a pre-meltdown conversation. So what that is have the conversation with your partner. It can really take 5 minutes. I know that when I'm feeling tense and when I'm raising my voice with the kids or with you, it means that I haven't had time for myself. And what do you need? Do you need a hug? Do you need space? Do you need to call somebody? How can you help each other? So having those pre-meltdown conversations means that you can give each other the exact support that you need in that moment. Because remember, you can't think rationally in those times. You have to think about it ahead of time so you've got the tools ready to go.
I love how you said pre-meltdown, but many times it's like mid-meltdown. It's like in meltdown. Leanne, what do you have to share about, being happy in chaos?
I would say my number one thing would be self-care, and that people need to make sure that they're getting that little piece of time every day, whether it's half an hour, whether it's an hour, to work out, to go for a walk, to meditate, to read a book, to do whatever it is that they need to do to, get grounded, feel calm again. And it's really important that, we all take it upon ourselves to make that happen, that we don't, rely on someone else to say, oh, you've had a really stressful day. Why don't you go take half an hour and do something for yourself? We have to say, I need that time. I'm going now, and I'm going to make sure that it happens.
Okay. And now for the panel, which is really helpful for our guests, what are some helplines or hotlines that are important for couples and maybe even children to have, like resources? And if you want to point to any resources you have, please let me know. And I'll start with Leanne in this case.
I don't have them at my fingertips, but I mean, for domestic violence, there's definitely hotlines, and I can certainly provide them, in the comments or something after the show if need be. So if you're in an abusive situation, there's a, domestic violence hotlines you can call. There's shelters that you can call. There's mental health, phone lines, and maybe Allison will be better positioned to, give a little more information on that. But certainly I've heard calls are up on those types of helplines. So it's important that, people know how to access them and where to find them.
Ooh, 1 second, ladies. There is a question, and it's an important one. How do I deal with a toddler who's constantly asking for her dad, and father is not in the picture and does not keep in touch? Wow. I think Allison would be best to answer this question. And thank you so much for the question.
Yeah, this is a tricky one for many reasons. And thank you so much for asking this. This is a really vulnerable question. And I know a lot of single moms and single parents can really relate to this. So toddlers, especially, they're asking for this person who's their caregiver, and they're in their brain, in their development right now, it's just this longing to feel safe and secure in the world. And so your presence, you are giving that to them. And if you are able to speak about their father in a loving way still, and to keep the story as simple as possible for your child, they don't need the complicated details about your relationship or about why they aren't there, but just that they love you, and they'll be in touch soon, and just know that I'm here for you, and really, really validating that you are that secure base for them. And again, we don't want to be speaking negatively about the other parent. And sometimes that can be difficult, but that's really important for the well-being and the mental health of your child.
That's such any advice or commentary, Leanne?
No, I mean, I agree with what Allison said. I think that it's important that the child, I think, number one, understands that it's not their fault. If dad's not in the picture, and, sometimes children, in my experience, they blame themselves. They feel like, am I unlovable? My dad doesn't love me. That's why he's not around. And so I think it's just really important for mom to make sure that the child really understands that it has nothing to do with the child. It's dad's issue or reasons, and really reinforce that so that the child's self-confidence and self-esteem isn't undermined while growing up.
I shared a piece of advice in our promotion of our event and our conversation tonight, that I feel it's really important that when your partner asks for space, that you honor that space. And Allison had mentioned when she first came on, some of the big stresses is that people that are confined in this space are actually not getting that space. Can any one of you or all of you one at a time share a creative way to create space in the home, particularly maybe when it is a tight quarters? I've seen some people turning a closet into a meditation room, or whatever that looks like. Natalia, so lovely to have you back. Let's start with you, and hopefully we'll be able to have this conversation. What's a creative way in your opinion, for people to create space for themselves when they desperately need it?
Okay, well, I'm just going to ask, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I live in a very small place with my partner. We have a 1-bedroom apartment, and you can still find space where it's like, I need the living room for like an hour to like work out. You can kind of work out some of those agreements, or like, I'm going to go and take a bath. There are definitely, creative ways, and it's just communication.
So bath time, I haven't done that in a long time. Thanks for that tip. And I'm going to ask him to run me that bath. Allison.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're looking for staying at home tips, but I am such a huge supporter of getting out of the house. We can do that right now. And sunlight and vitamin D is so important for our mental health, especially right now. So I have couples, and I love this. They schedule it in for one person to leave the house to go on their bike ride at a certain time every day. And they know that, okay, that's when I'm going to be in the house on my own. And then their partner is, maybe gonna like social distance ride by to a friend or two along their route, you know? So everybody's still getting something that they need in a way that is healthy and safe.
Great. Leanne, did you answer the question?
I haven't, and I agree really with the suggestions so far. The only thing I might add is that, another way that someone might be able to create some space for themselves is to adjust their schedule. For example, I know in my home, if I get up early, because people are still sleeping, even though sometimes I don't always feel like getting up, often that can be my most enjoyable time of the day because it's quiet. I can, read, work out, meditate, whatever it is I want to do, or just surf the net and do something, mindless, but it's my time. And I don't have clients bothering me. I don't have people in the house that are up yet. So I find that's really helpful.
Okay. What do you say to a partner? I don't know if you've had this experience where, one person wants to, as you said, Leanne or Allison, somebody wants to talk and you want to listen, and then there are times that as a partner you don't want to listen, like, you you don't want to hear the conversation or the constant, like, we hear the term nagging, right? Like, you're nagging me or I'm nagging you, and maybe the house may be more in a disarray for some people because you are, I can't imagine all the moms that are parenting and childcare, and like, so yeah, the house is going to be a little bit out of whack, and then you've got somebody or a partner that's thinking, okay, well, they don't like that uncomfortability. It's so challenging for everyone. I'd love to just hear some advice on dealing with the overwhelm, like the whole thing, all of it. How do you deal with that? And what's a way to communicate with your partner when you just, you don't want to listen? Or is that a bad, is that just bad? I don't want to listen. Allison?
How do you deal with the overwhelm? I mean, I think I said this earlier and I'll say it again, but just finding this compassion for ourselves and for each other right now. This is unprecedented times. I was even thinking earlier, everybody is in our house 24/7. We're in and out. Everything's dirtier. We're doing more dishes. We're doing more everything. Like, the workload of the domestic world, of the domestic life, is so increased right now in every household, regardless of the number of people, because we're all home all the time, right? And really, it takes practice to communicate with each other. It's not just something that happens instantly. Just like your bicep and you go to the gym and you work out to gain strength, it's the same thing with your communication and your compassion and your empathy, like we chatted about, right? Like, it takes practice to do these things. And whatever was already in place in your relationship before the pandemic is going to be magnified. So the good things and the great communication that you already had is going to be at its best right now. And the lack of communication or the things that you irritate about each other, those are also going to be magnified. So just everything is being highlighted during this time. So just, again, finding compassion for yourself first. And when you can do that, that helps you find compassion for your partner.
Okay, so that's been a recurring theme, is the being empathetic, sort of being at the other end, experiencing what they're going through, and not making it all about yourself or me. Don't make it about me.
We're in it together. I mean,
Yeah.
we're all in it together, aren't we?
Yes.
It's not just happening to one person.
100%. And Leanne, do you believe that if there's a couple, and they do want to have that discussion of the separation, as we talked about, that can be done amicably as well, so long as both people are mature and they're willing and say, hey, look, this is not a great situation, but it seems like, it's better for us to, I live on this side of the house, you live on that side of the house. Is there, can we find agreement and in a time like this?
I think that we can, as you just said in your question, if people can behave maturely and reasonably, there's no reason why they can't decide that, what, this really isn't working, but let's try and be adults here and, make this as amicable as possible, because we're stuck living, in the same home, at least until this current situation ends. And I'm sure there are couples who are doing it. And, in the long run, they're going to be better off. Their children are going to be better off. Their finances are going to be better off, all of that. But having said that, I think it is hard for some couples to get to that level where they can be reasonable when they have somebody who's constantly pushing their buttons or belittling them, or all of that. But that's where you have to know your situation and know what you need to do with boundaries and whatnot to protect your own sanity.
Okay, and Natalia, because you're back, I'm always going to throw a question at you because I don't know how long you'll be here, but I'm going to throw it at you. How can a person deal with loneliness? I would imagine that someone going through a breakup, as you said, they have to grieve. So, do you have any tips around that grieving process, as well as, dealing with loneliness? Is that just a state of mind? Is there a practice, a tip, some action they can do to overcome that?
Yeah, when it comes to, the grief or breakup recovery, heartbreak recovery method, there are usually three parts. And one part is processing, like, just all of the emotion. And that can be, with yourself, just journaling, talking it out to other people in your community, to, with like a therapist or a coach, all of that. And then there's like the rebuilding parts of your life. Perhaps there are certain routines that now you need to kind of make your own as you transition, from a couple identity to now you're a single person. And then the third component that a lot of people forget is you need pleasure in your life. You need to balance all of that work and that grief with some lightness. And that's where something like a hobby, something that you've always wanted to do that's like just for you, I also encourage people to add that.
Thank you. Any other tips before we wrap up? Actually, Natalia, I have your information at the bottom there, but can you let our audience know where to reach you, how to find you, if they're looking for support in breakup recovery, and maybe even getting their ex back?
Yes. Yeah. I'm like,
you do
good
both.
at it.
You
Like,
do one or the other. Do you want to break up or get back together? Either one, I got you.
So I would encourage people to find me on, I would say, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook. And yeah, just connect with me. I offer, short consultations just to see if working together is a good fit. But yeah, I've got a lot of amazing content in the pipeline. So I would just say to just get connected.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for being resilient and keeping to pop back on. I'm so glad that you were here. Bye. All right. Allison, how can the lovely folks reach you? And also, let me just take that off there. What do you have for those who are watching?
Well, we have been talking a lot about self-care tonight. I think we can all agree how important that is. And a lot of people don't know what is self-care and what that looks like specifically for them. So I have a free self-care toolkit that I've designed, which is a little video, and it's designed to watch with your partner so you can get on the same page. And then there's a self-care recipe, so you can figure out what self-care looks like specifically for you. So you can grab that.
And would you mind adding that to the conversation thread so that anybody who's there can actually take that on?
Yes, absolutely. I will do that.
Okay, and they can find it also on your Facebook page. So thank you so much for joining us, and we can't wait to get your hands on those resources. Bye, Allison.
Bye.
All righty. And Leanne, I really hope that singles won't have to take on or coupled will have to take on your advice, but it is a fact of life. Not all relationships are meant to be, and sometimes it's better to live happily apart, and do it properly and do it efficiently and with the right legal counsel. So how do our viewers get a hold of you to help them strategize their potential divorce?
Yes, hopefully viewers don't need me, but if they do, or if they even just want to know what their rights are, in case down the road they decide to leave, it's always good to get the lay of the land for that. So they can find me at my website. My personal website is www.leannetownsend.ca, and all of my contact information is there, including the link to the law firm I'm at, Brody Thorning LLP, as well as all my social handles on Instagram and Facebook.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And that concludes our Couples in Quarantine. And we hope that you stay safe, and we hope that you stay happy. Bye.
Bye.